The auditorium buzzed with excitement, caps and gowns swishing as graduates lined up to take their seats. My heart pounded with a mixture of nerves and pride. Years of sleepless nights, endless assignments, and quiet determination had led me here, to my graduation day. Claire waved from across the rows, grinning ear to ear. I smiled back, grateful for her support. She had been my anchor through every storm, the one who reminded me to keep pushing when my own family's encouragement fell short. Because if I was being honest, support from my family had always been complicated. My father, Ethan, kept his distance, offering polite but shallow words when milestones arrived. My mother, Linda, on the other hand, rarely hid her disapproval. She had always made it clear she didn't think I was enough, not smart enough, not ambitious enough, not worthy enough. But today, I wanted to believe things would be different. Today, standing in my cap and gown, ready to walk across the stage, I hoped even Linda would feel proud. The ceremony unfolded with the usual pomp and formality. Professors gave speeches, names were called, applause filled the air. When my turn came, I walked across the stage, shaking hands with Professor Haas, who gave me a smile that said more than words ever could. He knew how hard I had worked, how much I had sacrificed. Clutching my diploma, I returned to my seat, my chest swelling with relief and joy. For once, I let myself believe I deserved this. Afterward, families poured into the courtyard, snapping photos, embracing their graduates. Ethan shook my hand awkwardly, mumbling, "Good job, kid." It wasn't warm, but it was something. Then Linda stepped closer. She fixed my tassel, her face unreadable. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, she was proud. But as she leaned in, her lips brushed my ear and her words pierced through me like glass. "You don't deserve this." The world tilted. The laughter around us dimmed. The camera flashes blurred. I pulled back, staring at her, waiting for some sign that I had misheard. But her expression was cold, detached, as though she had merely stated a fact. My throat tightened. The diploma in my hand suddenly heavy, meaningless. This day, this victory, crumbled in an instant. She didn't believe in me. She never had. And in that moment, a quiet decision formed in my heart. A decision that would change everything. If my own mother couldn't see my worth, then maybe it was time I walked away forever. The courtyard was alive with celebration, but all I could hear were those 4 words echoing in my head. "You don't deserve this." They clung to me like a stain I couldn't scrub out, louder than the applause, sharper than the laughter. Linda smiled faintly for the cameras. Her arm draped stiffly around my shoulders, but her eyes never softened. When Ethan suggested we take a family photo, I forced myself to stand still. The corners of my lips tugged upward in a hollow smile. Inside, I was collapsing. Claire spotted me from across the lawn and hurried over. "Natalie, you did it!" she cried, wrapping me in a hug. Her warmth nearly undid me. "I'm so proud of you." I held onto her tighter than I meant to, blinking back tears. "Thanks," I whispered, my voice shaky. Linda cleared her throat. "Well, it's not as though she graduated with honors," she said flatly. "Plenty of people walk across that stage every year." Claire froze, her eyes widening. She opened her mouth to respond, but I shook my head quickly. I couldn't let my best friend fight my battles for me, not today. Still, the damage was done. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, muttering something about traffic as he checked his watch. My parents were already making excuses to leave. No celebratory dinner, no heartfelt congratulations, no moment of pride. Just a quick goodbye, a perfunctory hug from Ethan, and a cool kiss on the cheek from Linda before they walked away. I stood there, watching their backs disappear into the crowd, my diploma clutched in my trembling hands. This piece of paper represented years of sacrifice, working part-time jobs to cover what scholarships didn't, staying up all night to finish papers, skipping social events because I couldn't afford distractions. I had earned it. And yet, to my own mother, it still wasn't enough. Claire touched my arm gently. Don't listen to her. You worked harder than anyone I know. You deserve this more than anyone here. Her words wrapped around me like a lifeline, but even they couldn't erase the ache. My eyes drifted toward Professor Hayes, who was shaking hands with a group of graduates nearby. When he noticed me, he offered a small nod, a quiet acknowledgement that seemed to say, I see you. I know your worth. I swallowed hard, a lump forming in my throat. Why could a mentor, a friend, even strangers see my value when my own mother never could? That night, lying in bed, I replayed the moment over and over. Her whisper was like a brand, seared into me. But as the hours stretched on, another thought took root. Maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't deserve her approval. The morning after graduation, the sunlight streamed through my blinds, but it brought no warmth. My cap and gown lay crumpled on the chair, the diploma tucked inside its folder like a secret I couldn't bear to look at. My phone buzzed with messages, friends posting photos, congratulating one another, tagging me in smiling group shots. I scrolled through them, my own face frozen in strained smiles. Everyone looked so full of joy, yet I remembered only the icy whisper in my ear. Claire called. Hey, you alive? I was going to drag you out for celebratory pancakes. Her voice was a balm, and though I wanted to hide, I agreed. We met at the diner we'd frequented during long study nights, the scent of coffee and frying bacon wrapping around us like a memory. You're too quiet, she said after we ordered. Tell me what's going on, and don't say nothing. I saw your mom yesterday, remember? I stirred my coffee, the spoon clinking against the mug. She told me I didn't deserve it. Claire's eyes flashed. She what? I repeated the words, softer this time, as though saying them too loudly might shatter me again. Claire leaned back, shaking her head in disbelief. Natalie, that woman, I don't even have words. You worked harder than anyone. If anyone deserves that diploma, it's you. Her certainty was a balm, but it also made me ache. Why can't she see it, Claire? Why has it never been enough for her? Claire reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Because it was never about you. It's about her, her insecurities, her need to control, her inability to be proud of something she didn't create. That's on her, not you. The words lingered long after we left the diner. Maybe Claire was right. Maybe Linda's disdain wasn't a reflection of my worth, but of her own emptiness. Still, it didn't erase the pain of a daughter craving her mother's love and never finding it. Later that afternoon, I met with Professor Hayes. He had emailed me to say he wanted to congratulate me personally. Sitting in his book-lined office, I felt small, but his warm smile quickly disarmed me. Natalie, he said, leaning back in his chair, you've shown resilience that many students twice your age never learn. You didn't just complete a degree, you built a foundation for yourself. Don't let anyone, not even family, convince you otherwise. Tears stung my eyes. I didn't tell him what Linda had said, but somehow he seemed to know. Walking out of his office, diploma tucked under my arm, I felt the stirrings of something I hadn't allowed myself before. Not pride, not yet, but resolve. If my mother couldn't celebrate me, then I would learn to celebrate myself. Days passed, but Linda's whisper clung to me like a shadow. I tried to focus on the future, job applications, interviews, the endless uncertainty that comes with leaving school. But her voice was always there, telling me I didn't deserve any of it. Ethan called once, asking how I was doing. His tone was polite, distant, as though he were checking off a box on a list. Your mom said you've been quiet since graduation. Everything okay? I wanted to scream. No, Dad. Everything is not okay. Your wife broke me with 4 words, and you let her. Instead, I muttered, I'm fine, and the conversation drifted to weather and sports. He didn't ask again. Claire, on the other hand, refused to let me drown. She showed up at my apartment with takeout, insisting we watch movies until my laughter returned. She reminded me of the girl I had been before Linda's words sank their claws into me. the girl who had once believed she could take on the world. One evening, after Claire left, I sat alone in my room, staring at the diploma on my desk. I ran my fingers over my name, embossed in gold, proof that I had achieved something real. The ache in my chest deepened. I wanted my mother to be proud, even if she never would be. The next weekend, Linda invited me to dinner. Against my better judgment, I went. Ethan sat silently at the head of the table, his newspaper folded neatly beside him. Linda served roast chicken, her movements precise, her smile brittle. "So," she said, slicing into her food, "what's next for you? Graduate school? A job? Or are you planning to drift for a while?" The jab was subtle, but I felt it pierce. I set down my fork, forcing my voice to remain steady. "I'm applying for jobs in my field. Professor Hayes even offered to write me a recommendation," Linda smirked. "Well, let's hope his praise can make up for the fact that you didn't graduate top of your class." Ethan cleared his throat, but he didn't intervene. He never did. I felt my stomach twist, the meal turning to ash in my mouth. For years, I had endured these comments, swallowed them whole, and tried to prove myself again and again. But tonight, something shifted. Maybe it was the diploma still fresh in my memory, or Claire's words echoing in my mind. But I suddenly saw the truth. Nothing I did would ever be enough for Linda. And maybe it didn't have to be. I pushed my chair back, my voice quiet but firm. "I don't need your approval anymore, Mom." The silence that followed was louder than any shout. Linda's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Ethan stared at his plate. And for the first time in my life, I felt a flicker of power. The silence at the dinner table stretched on, thick and uncomfortable. Linda's eyes narrowed. Her lips pursed in a way that always made me feel like a child being scolded. But this time, I didn't look away. Finally, she set her fork down with a sharp clink. "Don't be ridiculous, Natalie. Of course you need my approval. Parents know best. You're too young to think you can make it on your own." I took a deep breath, my hands trembling slightly under the table. "I've been making it on my own for years, Mom." You just never noticed. Ethan shifted in his seat, his eyes darting between us. "Let's not fight," he murmured, but his voice lacked conviction. He was a ghost at his own table, a man too afraid to challenge the storm that was Linda. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. I came here hoping maybe things would be different. But I see now that they never will be. "You'll never see me as enough." Linda's expression hardened, though I caught the faintest flicker of something, fear, maybe, or the realization that she was losing control. "If you walk out that door, Natalie, don't expect to come back." Her words were sharp, meant to cut, but instead they steadied me. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I set my napkin on the table, lifted my chin, and said, "Then I won't." I walked out, the cool night air hitting my face like freedom. My heart pounded, my hands shook. But beneath it all was a sense of release I had never felt before. Claire picked up when I called, her voice warm and certain. "Good," she said when I told her what had happened. "It's about time you stopped letting her dictate your worth." That night, lying in bed, I expected regret to creep in. Instead, there was only clarity. My entire life, I had been chasing something I would never catch, my mother's approval, and now I was done. The next morning, I sent out more job applications, pouring myself into the future I wanted to build. Days turned into weeks, and then an email arrived, an interview invitation from a company I had dreamed of working for. When I told Professor Hayes, he smiled. "See, Natalie? The world is starting to notice what I've known all along. You're capable of so much more than you think." I held onto his words like a lifeline, because for the first time, I realized that my story didn't have to revolve around Linda's disapproval. It could revolve around me. The morning of my interview, I stood in front of the mirror, straightening the blazer I'd borrowed from Claire. My hands trembled as I adjusted the cuffs, nerves buzzing through me like electricity. But beneath the anxiety was something new: determination. Claire dropped me off at the building, giving my hand a squeeze before I stepped out. "Remember, Natalie," she said firmly, "you earned this. You deserve to be here." Her words echoed in my ears as I walked through the glass doors. The interview went better than I could have imagined. I spoke with confidence I didn't know I had. My answers steady, my passion undeniable. For the first time, I didn't hear Linda's voice in the back of my mind telling me I wasn't enough. I only heard my own. When it was over, I walked outside into the crisp air, a smile tugging at my lips. It didn't matter whether I got the job. I had proven to myself that I belonged in that room. A week later, the call came. I had been offered the position. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I clutched the phone, my chest swelling with pride. I called Claire first. She screamed so loudly I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "I knew it, Natalie. This is just the beginning." Then I called Ethan, out of habit more than anything. "That's good," he said simply, his tone flat. "Congratulations, I guess." No enthusiasm, no pride. It was a reminder that my father's silence was just another form of absence. I didn't bother calling Linda. She hadn't asked about my job hunt once since graduation, and I knew what her response would be. Another backhanded comment meant to clip my wings before I could fly. Instead, I celebrated with Claire. We cooked dinner together in her tiny kitchen, laughing until our sides hurt. And for once, I felt surrounded by real love, not conditional, not manipulative, just genuine. Later that night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I opened my diploma again. For weeks it had felt like a hollow piece of paper, tainted by Linda's whisper. But now, I saw it differently. It wasn't just proof of my degree. It was proof of survival, of pushing forward despite every obstacle she had thrown in my path. And it hit me then. Maybe walking away forever wasn't just about leaving my parents' house. Maybe it was about leaving behind the need for their validation. That night, I wrote myself a letter. "Natalie, you deserve this. You always did." I folded it neatly and slipped it inside the diploma folder, a quiet promise to never forget again. For the first time in my life, I felt free. Starting the new job felt like stepping into a different world. The office buzzed with energy, filled with people who valued ideas and effort, rather than family reputation or favoritism. On my first day, I sat at my desk, heart racing, when my supervisor leaned over and said, "We're glad to have you, Natalie. Your portfolio was impressive." Those words warmed me in a way I hadn't realized I was starving for. I wasn't just tolerated here, I was wanted. After work, Claire met me for coffee, her grin as wide as ever. "So how does it feel to be a working woman?" "Strange," I admitted with a laugh, "like I've stepped into a life that actually fits me." But even as I said it, a part of me braced for Linda's shadow to creep back in. And it did, 2 weeks later, when she called unexpectedly. Her voice was cool, clipped. "I heard you got a job." "From your father, of course. You didn't think to tell me yourself?" I froze, the phone pressed tightly against my ear. "I didn't think you'd care." "Well," she replied, "just don't get ahead of yourself. One job doesn't mean you've made it." I felt the old ache rising, but this time I pushed back. "It's a start. And I'm proud of myself, whether you are or not." The silence on the other end was sharp. Finally, she muttered, "We'll see how long it lasts," before hanging up. I sat staring at my phone, my pulse pounding, but instead of crumbling, I felt stronger. Her words no longer carried the same weight. I wasn't the same girl who had stood at graduation, desperate for her approval. A few days later, Professor Hayes invited me back to campus to speak to a group of students about transitioning from college to the workforce. Standing at the podium, looking out at the eager faces, I felt a surge of pride. I wasn't just surviving, I was beginning to inspire. Afterward, Professor Hayes clapped me on the shoulder. "See what happens when you stop doubting yourself?" This is just the beginning, Natalie. Driving home, I realized how true his words were. Every step away from Linda's influence brought me closer to the life I wanted. A life built on my own choices, not her criticisms. That night, as Claire and I celebrated with takeout and laughter, I finally admitted the truth out loud. I think I'm done chasing her. Done trying to make her proud. If she can't see my worth now, she never will. Claire raised her glass of soda. To Natalie Brooks, finally free. For the first time, I believed it. The months at my new job flew by, each day giving me another piece of confidence I hadn't known I was missing. My ideas were taken seriously in meetings, my projects praised, and for once, I felt like I was building something real. But Linda's presence lingered, like a ghost I couldn't quite banish. She sent the occasional text, sharp and brief. Don't overspend your paycheck. Or, your cousin just bought a house. When will you? Every message was a reminder that to her, nothing I did was ever enough. One evening, after another pointed text, I broke down in front of Claire. Why can't she stop? Why does she always have to cut me down? Claire squeezed my hand. Because, Natalie, your success threatens her. Every step you take forward proves she was wrong about you, and she can't handle that. The thought rattled me, but it also made sense. Linda needed to keep me small because she couldn't face her own shortcomings. For the first time, I pitied her. When Thanksgiving rolled around, Ethan called to invite me home. Your mom wants you here, he said. Though his tone carried little conviction, I hesitated. The idea of sitting across the table from Linda again made my stomach churn. But a part of me wanted closure, to prove, at least to myself, that I could face her without crumbling. Claire encouraged me to go. Not for her, she said, but for you. To show yourself how far you've come, so I went. The Brooks dining room was exactly as I remembered. The smell of roasted turkey, the clatter of silverware, the weight of unspoken tension. Linda greeted me with a stiff hug, her eyes scanning me as though searching for flaws. Ethan nodded politely, already retreating into silence. Dinner was a blur of small talk. Linda compared me to cousins, pointed out that I still lived in an apartment, asked intrusive questions about my salary. Each jab was meant to sting, but I noticed something new. I wasn't shrinking anymore. Her words bounced off me, powerless against the shield I had built. Finally, I set down my fork and looked her in the eye. Mom, I'm happy. I have a job I love, friends who support me, and a future I'm building on my own terms. I don't need your approval to know my worth anymore. The table fell silent. Ethan stared at his plate. Linda's lips parted, but no words came. For once, she had nothing to say. I stood, my voice steady. Thank you for dinner, but I won't keep coming back to be torn apart. Walking out that night, I felt lighter than I ever had before. Thanksgiving wasn't about family for me anymore. It was about freedom. The weeks after Thanksgiving felt like stepping into a new chapter of my life. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for Linda's opinion, wasn't bracing myself for her criticism. The silence from her was almost deafening, but instead of aching, it felt like peace. Claire noticed the change immediately. One evening, as we decorated her apartment for the holidays, she grinned. You're different, Nat. Lighter. Like you finally stopped carrying a weight that wasn't yours. I laughed softly. Maybe I did. Work was thriving too. My supervisor entrusted me with a major project, something I never would have dreamed of a year ago. Late nights spent crafting presentations paid off when the clients applauded my ideas. For once, success didn't feel tainted by someone else's judgment. It felt like mine. But one cold December evening, Ethan showed up at my apartment unannounced. His hands were stuffed in his coat pockets, his face weary. I let him in, surprised. I shouldn't be here, he said quietly, sitting on the edge of my couch. But I wanted to see you. I handed him a cup of tea, waiting. He sighed, staring into the steam. Your mom, she's angry. She says you disrespected her at Thanksgiving. She doesn't understand why you had to say those things. My chest tightened, but I kept my voice calm. I said them because they were true. I can't keep living my life to make her feel powerful. Ethan's shoulders slumped. I know. And I'm sorry. I should have defended you more. I've spent years keeping the peace by staying silent, but all it did was let her hurt you. For a moment, I saw my father not as the distant figure I'd grown up with, but as a man trapped in his own fear. Dad, I said softly, it's not too late to change. You don't have to let her control you, either. His eyes flickered with something, regret, maybe, or longing. But he didn't answer. He only nodded, finished his tea, and left. As the door closed behind him, I realized something powerful. I couldn't fix my parents' marriage, or Linda's bitterness, or Ethan's silence. But I could fix myself. I could choose a life built on love, respect, and truth. That night, I called Claire. I think I'm finally done, I said. Not just with Mom, but with all of it. The begging, the waiting, the hoping she'll change. I'm walking away. Claire's voice was steady, proud. Then you're finally free, Nat. And you'll never look back. The new year arrived with a crispness that felt symbolic, as though the universe itself was offering me a fresh start. I stood at the window of my apartment one January morning, watching the city bustle below, and realized I no longer felt like the girl caged by her mother's voice. I felt like someone who had chosen her own life. Linda hadn't called since Thanksgiving. The silence that once would have devastated me now felt like a blessing. Ethan sent a few texts, brief, hesitant, but I sensed he was still trapped in his own cycle, unwilling to break free. I couldn't save him. I could only save myself. At work, my project blossomed into success, earning me recognition I never thought possible. My team celebrated with laughter and champagne, and when my supervisor said, "Natalie, you're going places," I believed him. Not because I craved the validation, but because I finally saw my own worth. One evening, Claire and I met at our favorite diner. Over pancakes and coffee, she leaned across the booth and said, "You realize you did it, right? You walked away. You didn't let her define you anymore." I smiled, warmth filling my chest. Yeah, I guess I finally did. But the true moment of clarity came weeks later, when I was invited back to campus for an alumni event. I walked through the familiar halls, my heels clicking on the polished floors, memories tugging at me from every corner. Professor Hayes spotted me and waved me over. "Natalie," he said warmly, "I'm glad you came. I've been telling my students about you, how you pushed through obstacles most people couldn't imagine and came out stronger." The words washed over me like sunlight. Not long ago, Linda's voice would have drowned them out, but now her whisper had no power. After the event, I walked past the auditorium where graduation had taken place. I stood in the doorway for a moment, remembering the sting of that day, the way Linda had leaned in and whispered, "You don't deserve this." And then I smiled, because now I knew the truth. I had deserved it all along. Every late night, every tear, every ounce of effort had built a future I could be proud of. I didn't need her approval. I never would. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I pulled out my phone and sent Claire a text. "I think I'm finally free." Her reply came instantly. "You always were, Nat. You just had to see it." I tucked the phone away, lifted my chin, and walked into the night with a heart unburdened. I had walked away forever, not in anger, but in strength. And in that choice, I had finally found myself.